My daughter called me at 2047 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake anyway, sitting in the kitchen with cold coffee, the way I do most nights since Diane passed. The phone screen lit up the dark. It was Cassie. She didn't say hello. She just said, "Dad." And something in that one word, the flatness of it, the exhaustion, made my chest go cold. "Tell me where you are," I said. She was in the parking garage of Mercy General Hospital, 3rd floor, northwest corner, sitting in her car with the doors locked because she didn't know what else to do. "She told the nurses I had a breakdown," Cassie whispered. "She showed them something on her phone. Dad, she's trying to have me committed. If she does this, I lose everything. The baby, custody, everything." I was already pulling on my boots before she finished. "My name is Jim Calloway. I'm 64 years old. I spent 28 years as a county sheriff's deputy in rural Virginia before my knees gave out and forced me into retirement. I know how systems work. I know how people use them. And I knew, driving down Route 9 at 3 in the morning with my hazards off and my foot heavy on the gas, that whatever Vivian Ashford had started, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Before I tell you what happened in that parking garage, I need to back up, because this story doesn't start at 2047 a.m. It starts 4 years earlier at a dinner table in a house I'd never felt welcome in. Cassie met her husband. I'll call him my son-in-law, because that's what he was, whether I liked it or not, through a mutual friend when she was 29. His name was Theo Ashford. He was quiet in the way some men are quiet, not because they're peaceful, but because they've learned that silence protects them. His mother was Vivian Ashford, pediatric cardiologist, 40 years of practice, 3 hospital board seats, a wing at Mercy General named after her late husband, the kind of woman who arrived at dinner parties 20 minutes late so everyone would notice when she walked in. The first time I met Vivian was at a cookout at Theo's house, 8 months into Cassie and Theo dating. She shook my hand the way you shake a door handle, looked at Cassie the way you look at something that doesn't quite belong in a room, and then spent the rest of the afternoon telling me about her son's accomplishments. Not asking about mine, not asking about Cassie's. Just telling me who Theo was, as if she was cataloguing what Cassie was getting. Cassie told me later, laughing it off, "She's protective. She's just a mama bear." I smiled and let it go. I should have paid more attention to what I saw in her eyes when she said it. I got married 2 years later. Simple ceremony. 20 people. Cassie wore Diane's pearl earrings and cried when she walked down the aisle, and I cried too, even though I told myself I wouldn't. She looked happy. She looked like herself. The version of my daughter I talked to on the phone that night did not look like herself. She sounded like someone who'd been slowly erased, and was only now realizing how much of herself was gone. I pulled into the parking garage at 4006 in the morning. Found Cassie's car in the northwest corner exactly where she'd said. She was in the passenger seat, her knees pulled up to her chest. She was 7 months pregnant. I got in the driver's side. The first thing I did was look at her. Really look. She had a bruise along her left cheekbone, fading yellow-green, at least a week old. Her wrists were thin in a way that scared me. Her eyes were flat, not scared, not relieved, just flat, and that scared me more than anything else. "When did you last eat?" I asked. She thought about it. "Yesterday morning, I think." I kept my voice level. "Old habit from the job. Tell me what happened tonight." She'd been at the hospital for a prenatal checkup, late afternoon appointment. Vivian had shown up in the waiting room. Cassie hadn't told her about the appointment, didn't know how she'd found out. Vivian had gone to the front desk, spoken to someone Cassie didn't recognize, shown them something on her phone. Within 20 minutes, 2 nurses were asking Cassie if she felt safe at home and whether she'd been experiencing episodes. Someone had filed paperwork. Vivian had called someone in administration, a colleague, a friend Cassie didn't know, and flagged Cassie as a potential psychiatric hold risk. They wanted to keep her overnight for observation. Cassie had asked for her OB. He hadn't arrived yet. She'd walked out, sat in the parking garage, and called me. "She knows the whole department," Cassie said. "She's worked with these people for 40 years. If she tells them I'm unstable, they'll believe her. Dad, she's a doctor. I'm just. Cassie stopped. You're my daughter, I said, and she just made the worst mistake of her life. Start from the beginning. She talked for 2 hours. We didn't move from that parking garage. I kept the engine off and listened. It had started small, the way these things always do. Vivian had opinions about the wedding, which is normal. Then she had opinions about where they should live, which is less normal. Then she started calling Theo every day, morning, sometimes twice, and Theo always took the calls, always stepped out of the room to do it, always came back a little quieter than before. 6 months into the marriage, Theo started pointing things out. Small things. The way Cassie laughed too loud at dinner parties. The way she'd grown up without structure, which was his word and Vivian's word before it was his. Cassie's family was working class. My dad was a mechanic. Diane taught elementary school. We'd given Cassie everything we had, but we hadn't given her the Ashford name, the Ashford connections, the Ashford belief that certain people are just built differently from others. Vivian never said it directly. She didn't have to. She'd say things like, Cassie, it's wonderful how you manage with your background, and Theo has always needed someone to take care of. Compliments that weren't. Observations that cut. Theo stopped defending her. Then he started agreeing. Then, about 18 months in, something shifted, and the agreeing became something else. He told me I was paranoid, Cassie said. Every time I said something hurt me, he said I was being oversensitive. That I misunderstood, that Vivian was just being Vivian, and I needed to learn how to handle strong women. She'd started doubting herself. Therapy, which Theo had suggested and which, it turned out, the therapist was someone Vivian knew from the hospital, told her she had attachment anxiety. She was prescribed something for it. She took it for 8 months before she started to feel like she was watching her own life from behind glass. She stopped taking the medication on her own. Didn't tell Theo. 3 weeks later, she noticed she was thinking clearly for the first time in nearly a year. She started paying attention. There was a folder, Cassie said, on his laptop. He left it open by accident one morning. Vivian had sent him emails, going back 2 years, instructions basically, what to tell me, what words to use, what to report back to her. She was coaching him. She'd taken photographs of the screen with her phone. She had 43 screenshots. When did you find this? I asked. 4 months ago. Before you got pregnant. I was already pregnant when I found it. She put her hand over her stomach, and when I confronted Theo, he told me I was delusional, that the emails were taken out of context, that he was going to tell Vivian, and Vivian was going to make sure I got the help I needed. She looked at me. That's when I knew. She wasn't going to let me just leave, not with a baby, not when she could make it look like I was the problem. I sat with that for a moment. How long have you been planning to get out? I asked. 3 months, she said quietly. I've been waiting until I had enough. My daughter, who I'd taught to fish when she was 6, who cried when her goldfish died and then organized a tiny funeral for it in the backyard. My daughter had spent 3 months inside a collapsing marriage quietly gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment, while 7 months pregnant. I put my hand over hers on the center console. I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, Does anyone else know where you are right now? No. Good. I'm going to call your cousin Douglas. He's got a house in Roanoke. Nobody knows about your relationship with him because you two aren't close. That's where we're going. Cassie looked at me. Douglas still answers your calls? Douglas owes me for 3 things I'm never going to mention again after tonight. I pulled out my phone. We're going to disappear for a while, and while we do, I'm going to make some calls. I'd spent 28 years as a deputy. I still knew people. The right people. Douglas opened his door at 7 in the morning wearing a bathrobe and holding a cup of coffee, and to his credit, he took one look at Cassie, looked at me and said, Guest room's made up. I'll make eggs. That's the thing about family, the real kind. Cassie slept for 10 hours straight. I didn't sleep at all. I sat at Douglas's kitchen table with my phone and a notepad, and I started working. First call. my old partner from the department, a man named Art Belkin, who'd retired 5 years before me and gone to work doing private investigation. Art didn't ask for details. He asked for names. I gave him Vivian Ashford, Theo Ashford, and the name of the hospital administrator Cassie thought Vivian might have called. Second call, a family law attorney I knew from a decade of watching courtrooms. Her name was Sandra Pierce, and she had a reputation for being unpleasant to opposing counsel and excellent for her clients. I told her what Cassie had described. She told me to get Cassie's screenshots preserved immediately, document the unauthorized psychiatric hold attempt, and keep Cassie away from any Ashford-connected medical facility. Third call, I called the State Medical Licensing Board's public information line and asked how a citizen would go about filing a complaint about a physician who had potentially misused their hospital access to influence a patient's psychiatric evaluation. That call took 45 minutes. I took 6 pages of notes. Cassie came downstairs around noon, wrapped in one of Douglas's old flannel shirts. I pushed a plate of scrambled eggs toward her without saying anything about the fact that she ate the whole thing in 4 minutes. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "Some," I lied. She sat across from me and looked at my notepad. "Dad, I'm going to need you to walk me through everything. All 43 screenshots, everything you remember about the therapy, about the medication, about the timeline." She looked at the notepad for a long moment. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. "I'm going to build a case," I said, "and then we're going to give it to the right people and let them do what they do. But first I need to understand exactly what Vivian thought she was doing." Cassie talked for 3 hours. I wrote down everything. What emerged was not a story of a difficult mother-in-law with boundary problems. What emerged was a picture of systematic, methodical control. Vivian had used her hospital network to access information she shouldn't have had. She'd used her position and her name to put pressure on physicians and staff. She'd coached her son in precise language designed to erode Cassie's confidence and credibility. She directed Theo to steer Cassie toward a therapist she knew personally and could influence. She'd watched through Theo's reports as my daughter doubted herself more and more, and when Cassie stopped cooperating, when she stopped performing the version of herself that fit Vivian's design, Vivian had escalated. The psychiatric hold attempt was the clearest moment. That was Vivian trying to produce a documented medical record showing instability, a record that would be catastrophic in a custody hearing. "She's been building a case against you," Sandra Pierce told me on a follow-up call. "Not for the last 4 months, probably since the marriage. She needed documentation that Cassie was unfit." "What do we do with what we have?" I asked. 43 screenshots of email communications in which a mother coaches her son in how to undermine his wife's mental health. That's not just evidence of bad faith in a custody proceeding. Depending on what else ARP finds, you might be looking at tortious interference, potential elder and dependent adult abuse statutes given the pregnancy, and the medical board complaint could be serious if she used hospital resources to initiate an unauthorized psychiatric action. She paused. "Get me the screenshots, today." Art called back 2 days later. He pulled Vivian's professional history, 3 malpractice settlements, all sealed. 1 formal complaint from a former colleague that had been quietly resolved. More relevantly, Vivian had used her hospital login to access Cassie's prenatal records 6 times in the past year. Cassie had never authorized her as a healthcare proxy, HIPAA violations, potentially multiple counts. But the thing Art found that I hadn't expected, the thing that changed everything, was the life insurance. Theo had taken out a life insurance policy on Cassie 18 months ago. $2 million. He'd listed himself as sole beneficiary. He'd never mentioned it to her. I sat with that information for a long time. When Cassie woke up the next morning, I showed her what Art had found. She read it, put it down, picked it up again. Her hands weren't shaking. She looked like someone who'd just had a suspicion confirmed that they'd hoped was wrong. "When I told him I wanted to leave," she said quietly, "he didn't get angry. He just got very calm and said I needed to think carefully about what I was doing, that I wasn't in a position to make decisions right now, that people might get hurt." She looked up at me. I thought he meant emotionally. He might have meant exactly that, I said, but we're not going to find out by waiting around. Sandra had a forensic financial consultant she worked with. We handed everything to him. The insurance policy, Vivian's hospital access records, the timeline of the emails, the therapy documentation. He came back with two things. Evidence that Theo and Vivian had consulted with an attorney in the weeks immediately following Cassie's confrontation about the emails, meaning they'd known a legal fight was coming and had been preparing, and a pattern of transfers from a joint account that Theo had, opened in Cassie and his names without her active participation. Money had been moving out of that account steadily for 5 months. They'd been preparing to leave Cassie with nothing. I had one contact left I hadn't called yet. His name was Dale, not an Ashford, not anyone connected to Vivian's world. He was the editor of the regional investigative desk at the state's largest newspaper. We'd helped each other out a few times over the years, the way people in our respective jobs sometimes do. I called him from Douglas's back porch on a cold Tuesday evening while Cassie did prenatal yoga in the living room. "I've got something," I told him. I gave him the outline, not the evidence. Sandra had those, but the shape of it. A prominent physician using hospital access to manipulate a patient who was also her daughter-in-law, a pattern of financial preparation, a life insurance policy. The unauthorized psychiatric hold. Dale was quiet for a moment. "This is about Vivian Ashford," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't say anything. "She's been on our radar," he said. "There's a former resident physician who went on record about pressure she put on a colleague 5 years ago. We never had enough to move on it." He paused. "If you've got documentation of the HIPAA violations and the insurance policy, that might change things." "What would you need?" "Everything you've got, on background through your attorney." I called Sandra. Sandra called Dale. 3 days later they started talking. The thing about a woman like Vivian Ashford is that her greatest strength is the same as her greatest vulnerability. Her power comes entirely from reputation, the name on the hospital wing, the board seats, the 40 years of colleagues who answer when she calls. Take that away, make the name a liability instead of an asset, and she has nothing. She didn't know any of it was coming. The first blow landed from the State Medical Licensing Board. They opened a formal investigation into the unauthorized access of a patient's prenatal records. Vivian's hospital logins had timestamps. The access was documented. There was no version of events in which that access was appropriate. The second came from Sandra, who filed for divorce on Cassie's behalf and attached a motion for emergency protective custody of the unborn child, standard language in divorce proceedings involving documented evidence of financial manipulation during pregnancy. Theo's attorney, who had been expecting a fight, suddenly found himself looking at 43 emails in which his client's mother had coached him in undermining his wife's credibility. Those emails were not going to look good in discovery. The third came from Dale's newspaper 7 weeks later, front page of the Sunday edition. Not a hit piece. That's not how good investigative reporting works. Just facts. Patient records accessed without authorization. A formal licensing board inquiry. A former resident physician's on-record account of professional pressure 5 years earlier. Vivian Ashford's name, her title, her hospital affiliations. The wing named after her late husband. All of it in print. I was drinking coffee at Douglas's kitchen table when Cassie came in holding her phone, showing me a text from Theo. 2 words, "Call me." She looked at me. "Should I?" "Not yet," I said. "Let Sandra do it." Sandra called Theo's attorney that afternoon. The attorney, who had presumably read the newspaper, was suddenly very interested in a reasonable settlement. Theo, it turned out, was not the one driving this. He never had been. Vivian had been the engine. Without Vivian's protection, without her name, her network, her ability to make phone calls that produced results, Theo was just a man who'd made terrible choices and was now trying to figure out which way to fall. He fell toward his own survival. The divorce settlement took 4 months to finalize. Theo got the house and the debt that came with it. Cassie got full legal custody of the baby, primary physical custody, child support, and a structured settlement from the joint account that his attorney didn't fight nearly as hard as I expected. Vivian's hospital board seats were not renewed at the end of the year. The licensing board investigation concluded with a formal censure and a mandatory reporting requirement attached to her license. She didn't lose it, that would have taken more, but the censure was public record, the kind of thing that comes up when someone Googles your name. The Wing of Mercy General still has her late husband's name on it, not hers. My granddaughter was born on a Thursday in late April in a small hospital 40 miles from Roanoke, with no Ashford presence in the building. Just me, Douglas, and a very good nurse named Bev, who told Cassie she was doing great about 40 times and meant it every single time. When they put the baby in Cassie's arms, she looked down at her for a long moment and then looked up at me. "Mom would have had a name for her already," Cassie said. "Your mum had a name for everything," I said. 3 days after we brought you home, she had names for all the birds that came to the feeder. Scientific names. She'd looked them all up." Cassie laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her really laugh in as long as I could remember. "I want to name her Diane," she said. I had to look out the window for a while after that. Little Diane is 14 months old now. She has Cassie's eyes and a personality that already reminds me of her grandmother. The way she looks at everything like she's filing it away for later. The way she refuses to be distracted when she wants something. Cassie bought a small house in a town about 20 miles from mine. I drive over on Saturdays. We sit on the back porch while Diane pulls up handfuls of grass and looks delighted with herself, and sometimes Cassie talks about what happened, and sometimes she doesn't, and both are fine. I asked her once a few months ago whether she was angry at Theo. She thought about it for a while. "I'm angry at the situation," she said. "Theo did what he was raised to do. That doesn't make it okay. But Vivian built him. She spent 30 years building exactly the kind of man who would do what she told him to do. I'm not sure he ever had a real chance to be anything else." She looked out at the yard. "I'm mostly angry that I didn't see it faster, that I let him make me doubt myself for so long." "You were young," I said. "You wanted it to work. I should have listened to my gut." "You called me," I said. "In the end, you called me." She looked at me. "Of course I called you. Here's what I know about being a father. Most of the time the job is small. It's showing up to soccer games. It's helping with homework you stopped understanding in 7th grade. It's driving to the airport at midnight because the flight was delayed. Small things. Steady things. But sometimes, not often, and God willing not often for most people, the job is something else. Sometimes it's answering the phone at 2047 in the morning and driving 90 miles to a parking garage because your daughter said your name in a certain way and you knew. Diane looked up at me from the grass in Cassie's backyard and showed me her 2 bottom teeth in a grin that was so much like her grandmother's that I had to press my hand to my chest for a second. "Hi, baby girl," I said. She went back to pulling up the grass. The yard was quiet. The sun was out. Somewhere a bird was going through the same 3-note call over and over. They thought they could define what this family was, who was worth protecting and who wasn't. They had 40 years of reputation and money and a name on a hospital wall, and they used all of it trying to make my daughter disappear. She's still here, still standing, still the best thing I've ever done. And that little girl in the grass, with Diane's eyes and Cassie's stubbornness and not one drop of Ashford anywhere in her, she's going to grow up knowing exactly who she is. That's more than I'll ever be able to say. I keep coming back to one moment. Not the parking garage, not the courtroom language in Sandra's motions, not the newspaper headline on a Sunday morning. I keep coming back to Cassie on Douglas's couch, eating scrambled eggs like she hadn't eaten in days, because she hadn't, and not saying a word about it, just eating, just still being there. That's what I miss for too long. The quiet ways a person disappears before they're gone. What Vivian built didn't happen overnight, that's the part that stays with me. She didn't walk into my daughter's life swinging. She walked in slowly with good manners and a title, and 40 years of people telling her she was right. She used every bit of that to make Cassie doubt the one thing that would have protected her, her own judgment. By the time Cassie found those emails on Theo's laptop, she'd already spent 2 years being told her instincts were symptoms. That's not accident, that's design. I spent 28 years watching how people abuse systems. The ones who last the longest aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who understand that power isn't just force. It's the ability to define what's real. Vivian had built an entire architecture around herself. The medical credentials, the hospital network, the colleagues who answered when she called. She used all of it to make my daughter's truth look like illness. That's not just cruelty. That's a particular kind of intelligence turned toward destruction. What brought it down was the same thing it had always relied on: documentation. Vivian left tracks because she believed she was untouchable. The logins to Cassie's records, the emails, the insurance policy Theo took out without telling his wife. She'd been meticulous in her planning and careless in her confidence, and those two things together built the case that ended her. Cassie built her part of it quietly over 3 months, while 7 months pregnant, while pretending nothing had changed. She took 43 photographs of a screen. She remembered dates, names, the exact words Theo had used that matched the exact words in Vivian's emails. She held it all together when everything around her was designed to make her fall apart. I don't know many people with that kind of steadiness in them. She got it from her mother. What I've learned, and I mean really learned, the way you learn things that cost you something, is that the right response to that kind of calculated cruelty isn't matching it. It's being more precise, more patient, more willing to do the slow, unglamorous work of building something they can't knock down. We didn't yell, we didn't threaten, we found the right attorney, the right instigator, the right journalist, the right timing. We let the truth do what the truth does when you give it enough room. Little Diane is in the yard every Saturday now. She doesn't know any of this yet. She knows the bird feeder and the grass and the way her grandfather makes a face when she hands him something she found in the dirt. That's what we were protecting. Not a case, not a settlement, that. I hope if you're reading this and something in it sounds familiar, the slow erosion, the self-doubt, the fear that no one will believe you, I hope you hear this. Your instincts are not symptoms. The people who benefit most from your silence will always be the first ones to call your clarity a breakdown. Don't let them. Call someone. Drive 90 miles if you have to. Just don't stay quiet.